Hey guys, welcome to Epilogue, and I think you're going to really enjoy this episode of our podcast. I got the chance to sit down with Dr. Mark Mayfield, who's part of Faith Bible Church, and we talked about anger. And in this, we explored just some mind-blowing concepts around anger, and it's probably not what you think. And so I hope you enjoy this. We're going to delve into even how anger impacts us physiologically and how we begin to deal with it. And so, man, whether you struggle with anger or whether you're just interested in learning more, I think you're going to really enjoy this podcast. So thanks for tuning in. Enjoy this edition of Epilogue. Well, I'm really excited today because we are joined by Dr. Mark Mayfield. Mark, thanks for joining us today.
Yes.
If you haven't had the privilege of meeting Mark or getting to know Mark, I want to tell you a little bit about Mark. Mark is a professional counselor. More than that, he's been a pastor, has a pastoral heart, loves working with pastors, loves working with church staff. He is on the faculty of Colorado Christian University and the Townsend Institute. He works with the American Association of Christian Counselors. Published author. I mean, I could go on, Mark.
Please don't.
But it would embarrass you. So.
And we're done.
Because Mark is also humble, and I love that about you. But one of the things that you may not know if you're tuning in is that Mark works officially in an official capacity with our staff as a counselor and just a safe place for our staff to go to and process things with. And so I'm so grateful that you've offered that as a resource to us, and our staff is grateful. I know they're taking advantage of that and really enjoying that. So than's for doing that.
My pleasure. Appreciate it.
And Mark has been married 16 years, 3 kids, and he's just a great guy to know. I've enjoyed getting to know you, Mark. Thankful for just your friendship. Thank you for just the way you are here for us and our staff. And Mark and his family have been part of Faith Bible Church. Now, you guys have been here a year and a half.
It'll be 2 years in May.
2 years in May, man.
I know.
Time flies. That's awesome.
Yep.
So heavily invested at Faith Bible Church and really love the church. They just have a heart for capital C Church and lowercase c Church, Faith Bible Church. And so super grateful for that as well.
Yeah.
And thankful for what you bring to our church, just years and years of expertise and knowledge and experience with counseling. And so, today we're going to go down some rabbit holes.
We're going to have some fun.
Yeah, we're going to have some fun. Actually, before we get into our topic, what got you into counseling, man? Why do you do what you do? What drives you? Why do you keep going with it?
I think a lot of it is my own story of distress and struggle when I was in middle school.
Yeah.
Had some pretty dark times, suicide attempt. But then when I became an associate pastor in a small town, there weren't resources.
Yeah.
You know, we'd had an overdose, we had a suicide in our youth, and everybody's coming to me, and I'm like, I've got my theology degree and my Bible, which is great. Don't get me wrong.
That's what you're trained to do.
Which is
right?
fantastic.
Yeah.
But in the moment, it was like, I don't know what to do. And so my wife and I were newly married, prayed about it, spent a lot of time agonizing in a lot of ways about it, and chose to go back to school at Denver Seminary and more theology, more counseling, and it's, and then kept on going.
Yeah.
Sadistic way of going back to school and going back to school, just
a perpetual student, man.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I love it. That's awesome, man. Well, I'm thankful you stuck with it and just continue to have an impact in the counseling world and saw that need and said, hey, I'm going to fill this. I think we need more of that. Just
agreed.
Having been in church ministry 20 years, it's, seminaries, Bible colleges, whatever, like a lot of times in ministry, we're not prepared to deal with the kinds of things that you deal with actually on a regular basis. And so,
it's funny because I'm signing the contract tonight of my next book on the mental health playbook for the church, and it's a desk reference guide for pastors, and it's just like, because you're not trained.
Yeah.
And you don't go back to school. Like, nobody wants to go after an MDiv or a THM or anything like that. Like,
That's right.
I don't go back to school.
We're not as sadistic as you are,
No,
man.
but where do I get the help?
Yeah.
Is important. So
yeah. When you told me about that, gosh, a month ago or whatever, and I'm super excited about that. That's just a really practical tool, this guide to mental health that you're talking about. And that's going to be great. So, so today we are going to be talking about anger. All right.
So don't turn off the podcast.
Yeah.
After that statement.
Yes. Yeah.
Stay with us.
Stay with us. It's not going to be what you think, probably. And I know this because Mark was telling me some things, and I'm really excited about this conversation. So, yeah, as you know, we've been in Ephesians 4, and we talked about laying aside the old self, putting on the new self, and then verse 25, man, we start getting super practical, lay aside falsehood, speak truth to each other. And then 26 and 27, which is really what we're honing in on. Be angry and yet do not sin, and do not let the sun go down on your anger, and do not give the devil an opportunity. And then later on, verse 31, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice, some of these words that kind of tie in or feed into anger. But instead be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving each other just as God in Christ also has forgiven you. And so there's a lot in there about anger, actually, as it relates to laying aside the old self and putting on the new self. And so it's worth giving a little time and attention to. The Bible does. And so, when it comes to anger, where does it come from, Mark? Why do we get angry?
I'll make a comment real quick.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that Paul says, be angry, but do not sin in your anger. And he says that, and I'm like, as he's writing that, are you realizing that the only person that can do that is Christ?
It's Jesus.
But it's just an interesting marker to hold ourselves up. So like, where does anger come from? So here's what I'm gonna. People can disagree with me, but in my experience, anger is not an emotion.
Which is a big statement.
It is.
And that's like the bomb drop right now, because we all think of anger as an emotion. How are you feeling right now? I'm angry.
Yeah. So my challenge is for us to go, okay, if anger is not an emotion. So real quick, there's a difference between emotions and feelings. Emotions are our body's response to something happening outside of us or inside of us. Feelings are the meaning we make from that experience based off our own upbringing, based off our own observations, based on our own, and so we have to be very careful to say, an emotion is not sinful.
Yeah.
The feeling and how it's expressed can be.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is a good differentiation.
It is.
I mean, it's helpful.
Because we don't want people to think and be ashamed of the emotion, our body's reaction to something happening. But the meaning we make from it and then what we do with it is really important. So anger is not an emotion, in my opinion.
Is it a feeling?
It's not. It can be.
Okay.
Yeah, it can be, depending on your observations and experiences, watching a dad or a mom or that kind of stuff. But really, I look at anger as almost like a hybrid of a bunch of different things. So typically, when I'm working with men or women, anger then boils down to fear, disappointment, sadness, bitterness, and we can go on and on and on. But it's
Paul mentioned some of those things even in that text. Yeah,
and it's unforgiveness.
Yeah,
it's it's all these things that they're kind of tied up in this ball that expresses itself or shows up in the form of anger. And social culturally, we tie it to, okay, well, it's just anger. And I think that's a cop-out in some ways, because we don't actually sit with going, okay, why am I feeling this way? Instead, we choose to lash out.
Yeah.
We choose to take it out on people around us.
Yeah.
Versus taking the time to turn inward.
When it's deeply rooted in all these other things. And and maybe not just one emotion, but just this conglomeration, like you said. Yeah. Wow. That's good. That's challenging, and it's helpful.
It is, because when I'm getting frustrated with one of my kids, I have to go, why am I getting, if I'm not, I have to slow down, put the brakes on and go, why am I getting upset? And it's because, they're not doing it the way I want them to do it. Well, what is that tied to? Well, that's tied to control. That's tied to maybe I don't want them to fail. So there's a little bit of disappointment or sadness in there, or, and so we've got to tease those things out. And then I've got to take a step back, take a deep breath, put the brakes on and go, how am I going to choose to respond? You go back to Romans 12:1 and 2, this idea of, the conforming piece there is a passive, transformation is active, and we do that through the renewing of our mind.
Yeah.
And if we're not doing these things, then we're going to have anger. And that's why I love the what Paul talks about. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. It's more about he's looking out for us and how that's going to affect our own physical bodies, how that's going to affect our families. Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah. It is fascinating, man. I feel like, and I'm sure nobody's going to argue with this, but I feel like our culture is angrier and angrier. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a reason I'm not on social media, because it makes me, it doesn't make me angry, but I get angry. I struggle with anger when I get on there, just because there's so much of it there. And I just feel like our world is angrier and angrier. Mm-hmm. Why is that?
Because there's a lot of manipulation and control happening that is beyond our individual control. It spurs fear. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to deal with fear. We don't want to deal with the anxiety that produces. We don't want to deal with the worry that produces. So instead, we internalize it, and it comes out in anger. Mm-hmm. And anger, the expression of anger is a grasping at control. Mm. My internal status is not good. Yeah. And that scares me. So instead of dealing with that, I'm going to lash out at people around me so that I feel better about myself.
Mm. Yeah. And so you see the impetus of that being things like COVID, which I don't know if you remember Russell talking about this within the last few weeks. She said, we got so divided over a piece of cloth and two strings, but we felt out of control. Yeah. Because people were imposing something on us or not enforcing it enough, depending on where you stood. And so I'm losing control, and I'm going to lash out in anger, whether that's on social media or at other people. And
But here's the thing. We learn from observation and experience. Mm-hmm. So until somebody decides to stop reacting and stop being angry, whether it be in our politics or our entertainment or in our families or in our denominations, we're just going to continue to perpetuate that, because that's what we watch. We don't observe anything different. Yeah. And so that's where I think we talk about, kind of on a different note, how do we break generational sins? Yeah. We notice, we do the work, we break the patterns. Yeah. And that actually changes the neural pathways in our brains towards a different way of thinking. Yeah.
It's interesting you said that, because it's this hard work, right? It's it takes time. Mm-hmm. In our last podcast, Dustin and I sat down and we talked about how we all want that quick fix, or that magic pill, or that book that's going to fix it. And it's not that way with anger, right? This is really, like you said, turning internally, dealing with what's inside of me, and then that impacts my external responses and lashing out. Right. And
well, I'm not gonna be naive to everybody has got some form of big T or small T trauma. Mm-hmm. I mean, COVID is corporate trauma. Yeah. I mean, it's collaborative trauma. But I think a lot of times we are afraid of what we're going to uncover, and that's why we shouldn't do it by ourselves. We need to do it in a safe and trusting community, and that's why I love the ministries here at the church with Reengage and Regen and Merge and all that kind of stuff is just great tools. Yeah. But I think beyond that, we don't recognize that if we stay within that expression of anger, the ripple effects it has.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Man, gosh, I'm sitting across the table from a guy that you're counseling a lot of people on a regular basis. And you sit across the table from men and women alike. Are you seeing a trend in anger? Are you dealing with more men who struggle with anger, more women, or is it just kind of equal across the board?
I think it's equal across the board. I think it shows up more in men because I think in some ways it's socially acceptable for a man to be angry. Yeah. Versus a woman.
It sort of plays into that machismo thing,
which is a sociological construct that I think we need to break down. But I think the reason men choose to move towards anger is because they have not historically been allowed to say I'm sad, to say I'm scared, to say that I don't have it all figured out. You know, it was interesting. I don't know if you've heard this song by Darius Rucker about the struggles of being a man. And
I haven't. I stopped listening to Darius
Okay.
Rucker after Hootie and the Blowfish.
Okay.
So
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah, no, that's good. But it was interesting. I was listening to it going, oh my gosh, if that is the message that these men are receiving, then no wonder we're dealing with suicide. No wonder we're dealing with mental health and distress. And that's not the way it is. Not the way I see it. Right. I mean, and his song was, I played it to my wife and she got mad because it's like, I hope you don't feel that way. I'm like, no. Like, but this is what a lot of our men in our culture are facing, and it's shame producing. And so instead of going, I'm scared, I'm sad, I'm disappointed, I don't have it figured out, it comes out in anger, which usually is drowned in pornography or alcohol or some kind of substance because they can't deal with it. They need to numb it.
Yeah, man.
And so
so we're just piling up,
Yeah.
and so this anger becomes this socially acceptable expression of undealt with ball of emotions you described, and then we just cover it up with all this other stuff.
But here's the interesting thing, and we can unpack this for a minute.
Yeah.
But it's our bodies operate out of a just the way God designed it. Our cells vibrate, and they operate in a certain frequency. A healthy frequency for our bodies is between 9 and 16 hertz.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not going to break that down right now as far as if you don't know what a hertz is, but it's just it's a reading of frequency. When we are angry, our bodies are operating out of between 440 and 528 hertz.
Which is a big jump.
A huge jump. And the reason I say that is because we might be going, I've got my anger under control. Okay, maybe. But people around you feel it. And you're influencing and affecting people around you, whether you realize it or not. And that's where I want people to go, okay, I can't just numb it. I can't just hide it. I can't just say I'm okay. When you're not, because you're basically emanating a higher frequency that is pinging off your kids and your wife and your neighbor and your coworker, and you're affecting them. And so one of my favorite phrases is, don't take care. I'm not going to take care of you, and you don't take care of me. I'm going to take care of me so that I can take care of you. And you're going to take care of you so you can take care of me. And it's this idea that if we're really focusing on ourselves, I think this culture, like you said, the culture of like the quick fix, I think a lot of us look at the church as that too. I'm going to come to the church and you're going to take care of these things for me. And it's like, no, get right. The church is a place to get right before God and in community. And if we're doing that collaboratively and corporately, then we're able to affect the neighborhoods and the places that we're at versus coming to the church and go fix me.
Right.
I can't tell how many times I've had clients come in and doc, fix me. I'm like, oh, you're not going to like me much after that statement because that's not what we're doing.
That's not what we're here to do. Yeah. So you're trying to help people look inwardly and do the hard work themselves. Yeah. That's you were joking earlier that like one of your books, you were like, yeah, there's a reason it wasn't like a bestseller, and it's because people wanted it to fix them, and it's actually just encouraging them to do the hard work of journaling and all that stuff. And it's which is the most helpful thing you could encourage people to do. But people want that quick fix.
They do. Well, they do. It's the Dr. Oz, Dr. Phil, Oprah kind of mindset of like, just give me two things, I'll do it.
Yeah.
It's just like, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah. Like I wish there was something, that I could listen to or that would change that frequency in me, right? That was easy, right? That would impact me but ultimately I do have to do the hard work myself.
You do. And I think one thing that we need to pay attention to is that if we stay at that frequency range, it's what I call a pre-disease pathway. It actually is dumping adrenal and cortisol hormones in our body to the point where it's weakening our immune system. Yeah. And so it's not saying that anger is making us sick. It's saying that anger is weakening our immune system, which then allows us to become sick. And Harvard did a study probably 10 years ago, and I'm sure it's updated now, but in the 90s percentile of people in the oncology ward had unforgiveness, bitterness, and anger.
Wow. That's heavy.
It is.
I mean, that's when you think about that statement. I mean, that's just this warning sign going, don't let it keep going like this.
Which is where Paul in Ephesians, it now makes more sense.
Yep.
Don't let the sun go down in your anger. Well, okay. because
there's an urgency to it.
there's an urgency to it. And what I tell my couples is they quote that verse to me. I'm like, yes, it doesn't mean that it has to be resolved before you go to bed.
Yeah.
It just means that, if you want to use it from a frequency standpoint, bring your frequency down.
Mm-hmm.
Talk it to a place of that you love each other. You're not wanting to kill each other right now, as a married couple. But sometimes don't stay up until 2, 3 in the morning trying to resolve it.
Yeah.
Let the emotional reactivity, physiological stuff come down, and then go, okay, can we coffee tomorrow, 9:00? Can we pick this back up again and then resolve it? That's where it's going to be beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll tell you, man, just from personal experience, that's something Heather and I, like when we got married, it was actually her parents. We were like, hey, what's one piece of marriage advice that you want to give to us? And they said, don't go to bed angry. And, and we've tried to practice that. I mean, in the way you described it, we have tried to practice that over the last 20 years of being married. And it's just been a lifesaver for us. I mean, because we are just committed to not staying in an angry place. Yeah. And we have had those moments where we stay up till 2:00 if we need to, and sometimes you gotta go, hey, we're just exhausted, but we've talked it down to this point of going, like, let's go deeper than just with the surface level. Why am I angry? And let's talk about that. And man, that's just been a lifesaver for our marriage. But
it's in my bag over there, but I have a visual representation that I can show you, but we can do that some other time. But it's actually a tool that I use when I talk to kids. And it's actually a conductor of frequency. And when I give it to you and you hold on to it, nothing happens. But if we connect the circuit, it'll light up and make noise.
Whoa.
It's pretty cool. I just did it with a bunch of Lutheran kids at chapel today. Yeah. Just talking about the power of our presence. Yeah. Like our presence matters and it has power. And I talked about the idea that when you wake up in the morning and you're like, this is going to be a good day. And you go downstairs and somebody's grumpy, how quickly does that good day turn to grumpy? Yeah. So same thing with the anger piece is if we're in, and I think this is where I will encourage men and women alike, parents alike. You don't have to drill down and figure out the nuances of your anger now. You need to, but just to verbalize it. Hey, Jamey, I'm angry.
Yeah.
Like I'm really angry about this, and this, and I'm not sure if it's disappointment or sadness or what it is. Just me talking to you about it. Yeah, diffuses it.
Brings those frequencies
down.
Yeah,
and then you can go, okay, and then a response that would be great was, okay, let's figure it out, right? And now we're on this journey to figure out where this is coming from, so we don't spike and we don't, But I think sometimes we have to figure it out now. It's like, no, this is a journey. This is a process.
Yeah, and so good, so good. Mark, for people that are watching right now and they're finding themselves in this going, man, I'm really resonating with this. I feel my frequency's up a lot, and they're struggling with anger, struggling with lashing out. Like, what's the next step for them? It's not a quick fix. Like we said, it's a journey, but what would you tell them to do first?
Well, I think two things. You've got, if you're a part of faith, if you're not a part of faith and you're hearing this, like, come. You can still come. Don't have to be a part of faith. But Regen is absolutely fantastic. And it's basically, multiple weeks put together, and it takes you through a lot of the counseling process. And that was the whole point of working through, turning inward, all those kinds of stuff. I think Regen's huge. If that feels like too big of a commitment right now, talking to the care team, Dustin and Emily and Sarah and others to go, can I get some referrals? So there are referrals to some counselors. And here's what I'm going to say is you think that a counselor might be, this is going to be the long haul. Maybe they're going to give you 6-8 sessions of like, here's some tools. And then you get to decide what you want to do. I always tell my clients, it's the rule of thirds. A third of my clients have like heavens opening up aha moments in sessions. Yeah. A third of them are not quite sure things are changing, but their whole family's like, yeah, that's changing. Like, I can see it, like seeing a nephew they haven't seen in months and they've, shot up a foot and the mom's like, didn't notice anything. And then I say a third of my clients, nothing happens, nothing. And I look at my client in my intake and I say, so what's the reason for that? And they're like, my willingness. Like, yes.
That's the ones that are like, you need to fix me.
Yeah. The willingness for this to engage in this journey is what makes the change happen. And so, again, regen's not going to fix it for you, but it's going to give you the tools. A counselor's not going to fix it for you, but it's going to give you the tools.
Yeah.
But what I love about this is kind of the Deuteronomy 6 model of when we're doing these things, we're actually discipling our kids and showing them what it looks like to ask for help, what it looks like to heal, what it looks like to seek out community, what it looks like to be wrong, and to, and it's a beautiful picture of what familial discipleship can be.
Yeah, that's really good. And, something you said in there just made me think like, gosh, like, a lot of times, even if we are not feeling like we're lashing out, you mentioned this earlier, we're still putting off this vibe that's impacting people negatively.
Yep.
And it may just be a little grumpiness, like you said, in the morning or whatever, and somebody in our family, they're starting out great, and then they hear us just this little grumpiness or this one little comment that actually is anger lashing out because of something deep inside. It's hard to gauge our own anger without community.
It is.
Right.
Oh, it's totally.
And sometimes we need to ask the people around us, how do you think I'm doing in this? Right.
And I don't know if another conversation for a different time, but I always say that unresolved anger leads to loneliness. Loneliness leads to isolation. Isolation leads to death. Maybe not physical, and sometimes physical, but not always. Spiritual, emotional, relational, death.
Yeah. But you also mentioned it can impact our health.
Yeah.
So this is, so that just, it's detrimental to the people around us. It's detrimental to our own health. And so there's an urgency. There's an urgency to deal with this and to gauge how we're doing, ask your spouse, ask your kids, hey, how am I doing in this area?
And asking for help is the greatest way to diffuse it. One of the things I recognize in my own family is that if I'm upset and I don't really know why, I'm not going to keep that to myself. I'll tell my girls and I'll tell my wife, hey, I'm struggling right now. It's not you. It has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
I'm struggling. I don't know why I'm struggling. I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah.
It diffuses it. So now my daughter is not going around going, why is Dad mad at me?
Yeah. She knows you're struggling.
She knows I'm struggling, and it's not about her. And that's to verbalize it in the construct of community too doesn't maybe always fix it, but it diffuses it so it's not, everybody's not going, dang, what's wrong with Mark today? Like, oh, okay, he's wrestling with some stuff.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Which I love. We started this conversation and we said that the text says, be angry and do not sin. And we said there's only one person who can do that. It's Jesus, right? So it's hard for us to be like Jesus.
Right. We strive towards it, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Rich Mullins wrote a song a long time ago, Hard to Be Like Jesus. Yeah. I love that song, and it's so true. In this passage, like in chapter 5, it's going to go on to say, saying all this, therefore be imitators of God as beloved children. Well, that's hard to do. And that's why we need each other. That's why we need to do this in the context of community and being vulnerable and saying, hey, I'm trying to be like Jesus. I'm trying to put on the new self, but I'm struggling.
Yeah.
And it's good to verbalize that. It's good for people around us to know that so they can help us and walk with us because we can't do it in isolation.
Nope.
And so I love that you shared that you do that with your family. And I just think of what we could be as the body of Christ as we did that more and just shared that. And we're vulnerable with other people.
Amen.
So, yeah. Helpful resources. We talked about just being willing and taking that first step, being that's where it starts. You mentioned Regen. Any other helpful resources you would offer to people or point them toward if they're struggling with anger?
I mean, I think the American Association of Christian Counselors has got a lot of great continuing education learning stuff if you're in that mode. Yeah. I think that's great. Some books by Dr. Kurt Thompson are really good. The Soul of Shame, The Anatomy of the Soul, I think are really, really good books.
Soul of Shame, great book. I haven't read the others, but excellent book.
And I know Dustin's got a list as well. And I do as well. If you want to email me, I can get you a list.
Yeah, feel free. We'll share Mark's email on the screen, and feel free to email Mark if you want any other resources on that. But yeah, awesome. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. This is incredibly helpful. It's been eye-opening for me, and I I hope everybody watching, I hope if you're watching today, I hope this was helpful for you. Feel free to reach out. Like we said, you have Mark's contact info. Dustin, any member of our recovery and support team, they'd love to sit down and talk with you more. And then Regen is a great resource. Having gone through it, as I mentioned in the last episode, I've gone through Regen and just, man, eye-opening, eye-opening to anger came up at some point on my inventory, and there's other guys in there that were struggling with anger. That's why they were there. And I just watched them be transformed as they went deep. And I watched myself change as I went deep and just dealt with things that I'd never dealt with before. And so great ministry. If you're wanting to take a next step, that's a great next step. And you can jump in any Monday night. You don't have to sign up. You just show up Monday night and begin your journey. So great. All right. Thanks, Mark.
Yep, thank you.
We're going to do this again because I loved this. So, so we're committing right now. We're having Mark back. All right. Good. Thanks so much, Mark.
Yep.